Right, I think I'm not sure how blue that is, or if you're going to get bad reflections on that. But I thought I'd just make this Achilles tang video in front of the tank. So there he is, right there. That is my Achilles tang. So when I'm talking about my Achilles, you'll see him in the background. I was going to make a very kind of fancy video, cutting in, editing, and I just thought, nah, it's not me really. I'm not that dedicated, I don't think, to making YouTube videos. So I just thought I'd sit there. I've got a cup of tins and biscuits, and I would just impart what I've learned and what I've done to keep this Achilles. So he's been in this tank. He's in his third year now in this tank. As you can see, he's fully grown. I've never really had any problems with him, other than he was a very fussy eater when I got him. Right, so where should we start? So if we start back in George Shaw, biologist, first described his species in 1803. He had a couple of different names, but eventually Acantharus Achilles is where we've ended up. So he's in the genus Acantharus. It's in the family Acantharidae. Don't really need to know much about the classification, really. They're in the ray-boned fish group. I think that's all you need to know. The only reason you need to know is that Acantharus, if you're mixing tangs, mixing several, because I think I've got 7 Acantharus tangs in here, just take a bit more effort and a bit more thought to introduce them, to get them to play nice with each other. So when I decided to get this tank, it was because I wanted 2 fish. First was an Achilles tang. The second was a Lanardi wrasse, 2 of my favourite fish. So I decided that I would go for the longest rectangular shaped tank that I could get. And that's because if you are lucky enough to see Achilles tanks in the wild, or if you're not, you'd be like me, you can just watch some clips on YouTube of them. They live in that reef crest zone, so they're right on where the waves are crashing over. There's massive amounts of flow, huge amounts of oxygenation in the water, and that's where they spend their days, and they are battered and buffeted by the waves and the currents, certainly during daylight hours. I'd imagine they go somewhere else to sleep, but yeah, so for those sort of 12 hours of light, they are in a very strong current. You have to excuse me because I've made tea and biscuits because I'm British, so that's what we like. Yeah, so that's what they're at. So you need to kind of mimic, to a certain extent. Obviously, you can't have a massive reef crest zone in your tank. You're smashing things to pieces, but you need a long tank for an Achilles tang. Should do that on camera, should I really? Right. So you need a long tank. So one of the things that I do pick up on is when you look up, when you research a fish, whether you should keep them or not, whether your tank's big enough, etc. They often quote gallons, like suitable 180 gallon, suitable 250 gallon. That's not a good metric to use, because the shape of the tank is important, and also you could have a 20-gallon tank and a 300-gallon sump, in which case it's not available to the fish, is it? So they should give minimum dimensions in those sites when they quote what size tanks applicable to what fish. Because I would say you need a long tank, rectangular tank. Depth is not as important, even though it's nice if you can get it, but most of us can't afford to go deep, for cost reasons and for practical reasons. So you want to go long, because they want to swim, they want to open their legs, and ideally you want to be able to get up to a decent speed before they crash into the end of the tank, basically. So with that in mind, I crowbarred the biggest tank that I could get into this fish room. So the tank's 4 meters, which is 13 foot, and it's a meter back to front. So that Achilles, if he swims around the outside of the tank, basically he's done 32 foot of swimming, and he does. He will whip along this tank in 13 feet when he's up to speed is probably 2 seconds. I mean, now amazingly quick. He will also swim straight into a MP60 running at 100% like it's not even on, and he will just pick the algae off of that cage, and then he likes to just flick around and ride the current back down the tank. So that's one of the reasons my tank is this size, because I wanted an Achilles tank. I wanted to give it the best possible chance. So I guess my first thing that I see a lot of on YouTube is people buy a 4 or 5 inch Achilles tank and they put it in a 6 foot tank, and they think that's adequate. I don't think that's adequate. I don't think they're going to get a 10 inch like this guy growing to that size in a 6 foot tank. I just don't think it's big enough. So I would say minimum 8 foot, 9 foot probably is going to be an acceptable size for an Achilles. And the thing is, they are quite a highly strung fish, really. So they need to have room, one, to get away from other tanks, for example. If you've got a tank like mine, 17 tanks in total, and they just like to swim. They need a lot of room. So the other thing is, when I got the tank, so I got it at 4 meters long, which is the biggest I could get basically without having it built on site. Is the aquascape that I built is like a central spine down the middle. So I've done it. 2 reasons I built the aquascape the way it is. One, it sits in the middle of the tank. So this tank is a meter front to back. So there's probably 300 mil on the front, 300 mil on the back. I don't know what's that in inches. I'm a metric man. I'm sorry, I'm useless really with imperial. That's probably 9 inches, is it? Something like that. I don't know. Anyway, so there's clear run at the front and a clear run at the back. And my idea is, as the corals grow, I will keep that clear, because I want them to be able to shoot down the whole length of this tank unimpeded when they want to. So that's one reason the aquascape is like a spine through the middle. The other thing I've done is I've put lots of arches and swim throughs. There's loads of them in this tank, and there's little caves and things. And the reason I did that is because as these tanks grow out, and so for example the soul tang, they get a bit boisterous. So if he's chasing one of the other tangs, he's chasing Achilles in the past, when they get that size, a lot of the arches they don't fit through them. The arches are too small, so the smaller tangs be able to zip through, and it forces them to come up. And once they come up into the water column, you've broken that line of sight between those 2 fish, and it's quite good at diffusing any sort of aggressive behaviour, really. So that's one of the other things I did with the aquascape. So in terms of the actual fish, I mean, it's like any other fish, really. You want to see it in your LFS. You want to make sure it's, clean and healthy, feeding, doesn't look stressed. I mean, when they are stressed, they go to a very white sort of grey colour. They get a big patch on their chest. So you don't really want to see that in the shot if possible. Cloudy eyes. They should be fat. All tanks should be fat. You should never see a skinny tank. I do a lot of diving, and I've dived all over the world for the last, 30 years. I've never seen a skinny tang on a reef. They're fat. They have a big, good old girth on them, and that's how your tank should look. That's how they should look in your tank. So if you've got one in the shop, you want to try and see that it's feeding. They are finicky feeders. I can only talk about this one, obviously, and I got this as a big adult, really. So they can live between 10 and 20 years. I don't know how accurate those figures are. Sounds about right, I guess. But so I don't know whether my tang is 2 years old and has just got to full size. I don't know if he's 15 years old and he had 14, 12 years, whatever, in the ocean, picking whatever food he wanted. But when I got him, it was very difficult to get feeding. And I tried everything basically. I just tried any type of fish food. I don't really feed flake or pellets very much. I feed a lot of frozen. Obviously, I feed nori. But when I first got him, he would only take live brine, which is obviously better than nothing, but far from ideal. It just takes time. So, it took weeks. I think it took probably 6 weeks to get him to eat some frozen myces. I think I managed to get him to eat. He ate some live myces. And then I think I'll get him to eat the Vitalis algae rings. He wouldn't eat nori. I think it just looked strange to him. So he used to pick the algae rings off the bottom of the tank initially. So they're difficult to get feeding. So the other thing is, obviously, because they are very prone to ick, is I personally would never not quarantine a tank. I mean, I've made videos on my quarantine procedure. So every single fish in this tank has been quarantined. It's all gone through the same procedure. Most of it has been pretty plain sailing. Tangs are pretty resilient, really. If you get them in good position, most of them are good. Like I say, the main problem, well, the main problem for me with that Achilles was, one, it's just bloody huge. I had to find, because my normal QT tanks are probably, I don't know, 50 litres, I think. So I actually went out and bought 2 big plastic tubs. I think they were 110 litre tubs for that Achilles, because he was just too big to put in my normal tanks. But I use hybrid tank transfer. He went through there, and it gives you the opportunity to spot feed them. Just 2 weeks that takes, just time to look at your fish. So once I managed to get them through the QT, the other thing I do is I use an acclimation box. I don't know why, but acclimation boxes always seem to be tiny. I seem to think everyone just buys fish the size of guppies. So obviously he wouldn't fit in a normal, I don't know what they are, about 300, 400 mil acclimation box. I thought, I'm not going to put him in there because it's just going to stress him even more. So I made one just out of some plastic tubing and some netting zip tied together. I put it in this end of the tank here because this is the end that I tend to feed. So the other thing I think is quite important is when you introduce fish, that you put them where you put the food in, so that all of these fish that are in the tank already still get fed. So that in their head, that fish is not taking a resource away from them, because they're still getting the food. And the fish in the acclimation box will get stimulated by seeing all the other fish feed. So I think it works quite well like that. And I'll just leave them in there. I spy on them with a camera normally, see if there's any particular fish which seem upset by the new inhabitant in the acclimation box. And if there isn't, I try to let them out as soon as possible, because even being in an acclimation box is stressful. And I tend to, if it's in the netting box, I just cut the netting and I zip tie it up so there's a flap open, and I'll let the fish swim out on his own accord. So I think he was probably in the acclimation box, I think a day. He wasn't in there long. Yeah, and he didn't really get any problems when he went into the tank, to be honest. He was introduced quite early. I don't think there was many tangs in there. And the Soho tang was probably 3 inches smaller than him when that Achilles went in. And the Achilles went in as the biggest fish in the tank when he was introduced. Obviously now he's been overtaken probably by, I think the Dusamari is about the same size as him at the moment. the naso would probably overtake him, and certainly that subhole is bigger. Yeah, so that went pretty smoothly, really. So I also, even though I have quarantined every fish, I don't run sand. Partly because I don't. If you do get ick in a tank, I think sand just allows it to proliferate more than a bare bottom, because those cysts drop into that sand. Whereas with a bare bottom, they're going to get blown up, they're going to get picked off, they're more likely to be swept up and into the overflow, and either skimmed out or killed through the UV. So I also run 180 watts of UV on this tank, which is double what they say is necessary, but I'm not sure how accurate their figures are. They're D&D 80 watt UV sterilisers. I also run ozone. I don't think that does anything against parasites really. It may do something against bacteria infections. Yes, I can't think of much else that you would need to do. Yes, I mean, they're not really. I mean, you wouldn't do anything specifically different other than make sure the tank size is big enough that you're not going to get a stressed fish. Other than that, I mean, that's pretty much what I do for all the fish, really. You know, I've given it a big tank because it needs a big tank. But you know, in terms of picking a healthy fish at the LFS, everyone does that unless you're working on something and you want a disease fish and you're trying to work out how to cure it or something. But other than that, we all want to go and pick a healthy fish just feeding. We don't all, but I quarantine all of my fish anyway, so it doesn't matter if it's a Bangor cardinal or an Achilles tang, it's going to be quarantined. And I feed it a mixed diet. They get 2 sheets of nori in this tank every day. I tend to do one red, one green. At the moment, I'm just doing green because I've run out of red, but they get 2 full sheets. I just got one here, so I thought, yeah, so these sheets. So they get 2 of those. Or did they see that? 2 of those a day. They get 2 feeds of froze, one in the morning, one in the afternoon, and it's just that I just mix like Calanus, gold pods, PE mysis, RS mysis, bloodworm, rotifers, trying to think, copepods. I just try and mix a lot of different types of food. I just put it. I've got one here actually. So I've got just a dish. So that's mainly mysis. It's got 2 cubes of bloodworm in there, and it's got reef frenzy, I think it's called. It's just got some red algae, some calanus, might have rotifers in there. I love the reef nutrition roe, which is like the eggs. I really like that food, but it's just insanely expensive, so they don't get it very often. Yeah, so that's it. So what I do is I'll feed them while I'm here. Because it might calm them down a bit. They get a bit frisky when I sit at this end of the tank because they think they're getting fed. So as you can see, that Achilles is right in there, eating pretty much anything in front of his mouth, really. So a couple of tidbits about the Achilles tang, really, which I don't think a lot of people know, is one, they are reportedly monogamous, which means they pair up and stay paired in the wild. So it's quite possible that this poor sod was taken away from his mate in the sea when he was caught. It's a little bit sad, really. And the other thing is, they've got, so all surgeon fish have got this, not just Achilles tangs, but they have a whole array of taste buds in their mouth. So the Achilles tang has got it's got 1770, very specific number. So they're spread all throughout the buccal cavity, the mouth cavity, really. So they've got them on their tongue, which is more like a sort of plate on the bottom of the mouth, not like a tongue like ours, really. And just in that sort of throat cavity. And they've got specific shaped teeth. So all of these species of tangs have got slight variations on the teeth in their mouth, which means when they graze on the rock, they all have a kind of different striation pattern. And that's basically because they all preferentially feed on different types of algae, which is, it's just that kind of niche exploitation which we see in nature in all species. So it's why all of these can live on a reef, and they're not fighting for the same resource. So even in your tank, they are all probably eating slightly different types of algae if you've got multiple types in there. Yeah, so let's just cover the facts. And obviously, all of those taste buds in that mouth. Interestingly enough, the naso tang apparently has got the most taste buds of any of the surgeon fish. It's got over 3,000, I think. But it just goes to show why they are fussy when they eat food, because they can take it in and then they can taste it, and then if they don't like the taste of it, they spit it out. So if they're caught in the wild and they're used to particular foods, that's why they will reject the stuff you're giving them, because it's just going to taste strange, and it's going to take them a long time to accommodate to the food that you're giving. So I think really out of all the things, he went through quarantine fine, no problems. I was a bit worried because, you know, it's a big fish in a 90-litre container. I mean, he had about, I don't know, it's probably a metre long, I guess. Just, what's that, just over 3 foot. I mean, the nice thing about tank transfer as well, it's only 12 days. So I wouldn't have wanted to keep him in copper like that for like 30 days, for example. But you can treat them with copper. They go through copper fine. Lots of people put them through copper. I just think I use tank transfer method. I've done a whole video on my procedure for quarantining my fish. I picked hybrid tank transfer because it made sense to me. I like the hydrogen peroxide dips. I like the use of the praziquantel throughout that same 12-day process. And it also means, because there's no copper, I can put any fish that I get through it without having to worry about whether they're tolerant to copper or not, or intolerant, I should say. Yeah, so I think the secrets of getting a Achilles tang really are, I think the main issues are getting a healthy one, putting it in a tank that's not got parasites in it, ick particularly. Obviously, you're going to know if you've got velvet, and it needs room, and it just needs to have a kind of no stress events really, and that just comes down to keeping a tank. So this tank has got multiple redundancies built in. So the 3 years it's been in this tank, it hasn't had a stress event. It's had nothing, nothing major. You know what I mean? I've had odd things where maybe the salinity's gone a bit out, or you know, like I've just done a video saying the calcium dropped to 360. But these are little things. You know what I mean? You know, I've never had a power outage and the heating's dropped down to 17, or you know, it's boiled in the summer and gone up to 30, you know, or anything extreme really. So he's never been subjected to anything which would cause him huge stress. So I mean, the main stress he gets in his tank is the other tanks really. And as I said, it's a big tank. It's 3,000 litres. It's 4 metres long, 13 foot. That is. So there's plenty of room for those tanks to get out of the way of each other, basically. Bare bottom, I think, certainly helps in terms of just keeping parasites down. And then the other thing about having a bare bottom is they do that all day. it's obviously a great surface for them to just pick algae off because it's smooth, I suppose. But yeah, they do that all day long. They pick off the bottom, and I don't clean my back wall for the same reason. Um, well, for that reason, the fact why would I want to? Why would I want to add another 4 meters of glass to clean? Um, but yeah, so they pick off the back wall all day long where the coralline isn't there, and they pick off the bottom all day long. And every now and then he will shoot up and down the tank like a lunatic, just because that's what they like to do. So I can't really think of anything else that's pertinent to keeping an Achilles tang. Um, yeah, so I think it boils down to those, get a healthy fish, quarantine it, put it in a clean tank, and give it the room it needs. Don't put it in a 6 foot tank because even if it goes into 4 inches, you're going to just run out of room for that. You're either going to get a stunted fish or you're going to get a stressed fish and you're going to end up with a dead fish. Yeah, that's it. I can't think of anything else. Some people say you should put them in first, put them in last, put everything in together. I've made a video on that. Mixing tangs, I made a whole video about why it doesn't make sense to me to whack all your tangs in at the same time. The two obvious reasons are, one, I'm not going to walk in the shop and get 17 tangs in one hit, all of the tangs that I want. And two, I don't want to put that sort of bio load in my tank in one hit because everyone tells you go slow and you should do exactly the same with your fish. And there's no reason why you can't add tangs individually over the course. I've taken 2 years to get all these tangs in this tank. And I've not had any tangs killing each other. I pushed my luck and tried to add pairs of tanks, which didn't work. So I tried a pair of blues and I tried a pair of gems. The tank's not big enough, so you learn your lesson and you come out. So that's it. I can't think of anything else which is pertinent. So if you are thinking of getting an Achilles tang, then yeah, do that. Get a healthy one, quarantine it, and put it in a big tank. And I think you're going to be successful, really. So I wish you the best of luck if you decide to go down that route.